On this Wednesday night, one of America's worst school shootings. 19 children and 2 teachers gunned down in a Texas classroom.
Just an evil person started shooting.
The backlash.
This is on you. Why don't you get out of here?
The demand lawmakers take action once and for all. Neighbors helping neighbors.
Did you have any damage?
Oh, you want to see it?
Yes, I would like to see it.
The community effort to recover from a ferocious storm. Bringing lost children home, the delicate and controversial work ahead at a BC First Nation. And Teflon Boris, the British Prime Minister, tries to survive Partygate.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Chris Galis.
As a nation, I think we all must be there for them, everyone. And we must ask, when in God's name will we do what needs to be done to, if not completely stop, fundamentally change the amount of the carnage that goes on in this country? To state the obvious, like Corey and a lot of other people here, I'm sick and tired. I'm just sick and tired of what's going on.
U.S. President Joe Biden echoing what many Americans are feeling today after yet another senseless massacre. 19 children, the victims of gun violence, some as young as 8 years old. Good evening, and thank you very much for joining us. Everything about what happened in Texas on Tuesday is deeply disturbing, and we're going to take you through what we know tonight. We'll begin with Jackson Proskow, who's in Uvalde, Texas now. And Jackson, you've spoken to families about how they are supporting one another.
Good evening, Chris. What makes this tragedy so horrific is that it happened in such a small town where everyone knows someone who is in some way linked to the tragedy inside that school. And all day long, we've seen families coming here to the site not only to bring flowers, but to share memories of the children and teachers who were killed inside that building. The grief in Uvalde is impossible to comprehend. Dozens of families forever broken. A small town now synonymous with one of the worst gun massacres in modern American history.
2 of the teachers that worked at my campus, their daughters were murdered. I was shocked. I was disgusted. I was angry. I was, why?
No investigation will ever make sense of what happened here. An 18-year-old gunman stormed into an elementary school and slaughtered little girls and little boys in a grade 4 classroom at Robb Elementary School.
19 children. 19 children have lost their lives. 2 faculty members lost their lives.
Uvalde's parents spent an agonizing night at the local community center, giving DNA samples to help identify the bodies of their children.
I gotta find her. After the shooting, they don't know where she's at.
Jesse Rodriguez would later learn his daughter, 10-year-old Annabelle, was dead. 9-year-old Amory Jo Garza is also confirmed as a victim. Her father posted this photo to Facebook, asking the question, why? Teachers Eva Morales and Irma Garcia, a mother of 4, died trying to save students.
There's a hollowness that happens, there's a shock that happens, and I think right now that's pretty much what everybody's feeling because it's surreal.
The murderous rampage came after the gunman shot his own grandmother in the face and fled from police, crashing his car before he entered the school. In the minutes before he started shooting, he made a Facebook post.
Maybe less than 15 minutes before arriving at the school was, I'm going to shoot an elementary school.
But why he did it is the painful question with no clear answer. Just 2 days before the end of the school year, families are now planning funerals instead of vacations, as an exasperated nation wonders how this could happen again.
You're doing nothing. No.
During a press conference, the governor of Texas was shouted down by Beto O'Rourke, his Democratic challenger.
Sir, you are out of line.
A preview of how America's divide over guns cannot be overcome by any amount of senseless loss.
Jackson, what are we learning about how the violence ended up coming to an end at that classroom yesterday?
Well, Chris, we learned today that the shooter was apparently inside the schoolhouse for almost an hour. He was apparently shot and killed by a tactical Border Patrol agent who was part of that large police response here to the building. Remember, those police officers came under fire. Several were injured. They had to be very, very careful. We also know that more than a dozen students were injured and have been hospitalized, some undergoing surgeries for life-altering injuries after yesterday's tragedy.
Jackson Proskow in Uvalde, Texas. Thank you, Jackson. America's latest mass shooting has the country once again wrestling with its relationship with guns. Since January 1st of this year, there have been at least 27 school shootings with injuries or deaths across the United States. In that same time, 213 mass shootings generally have taken place in the U.S., incidents where a minimum of 4 victims were shot. That's an average of more than 1.5 mass shootings per day in 2022. Now, Texas Governor Greg Abbott calls it a mental health problem, but he's made it much easier to buy, carry, and use guns in his state. The official minimum age to own and carry a gun is still 21, but when House Bill 1927 passed last fall, Texans 21 and older got clearance to carry handguns in most places without a permit or training. Nearly 60% of Texans were against that law. And while that law got the most attention, in 2021, Abbott signed a total of 22 pieces of state gun legislation, including a law that allows people as young as 18 to buy a handgun if they meet requirements to own one or can prove they're under threat of violence. More than 150,000 people are still without power after last weekend's deadly storm. The grid was damaged from southern Ontario to Quebec City, and while it will be weeks before the full cost of the destruction is known, Ottawa's cleanup will be covered by the province. David Akin visited some of the hardest hit neighborhoods in the nation's capital, still dealing with the aftermath.
I'm really concerned right now about people who still do not have power.
4 days after the storm, and City Councillor Glenn Gower has thousands of his constituents still without power, phone service, or the internet. So he's organized volunteers to canvass blacked out neighborhoods.
What we're trying to do today is get out there into the community and go door to door and make sure we're reaching people.
There are dozens of streets like this one in Gower's ward in Ottawa's West End. City work crews are just now, 96 hours later, getting to the down power lines and destroyed trees. The amount of work has been overwhelming.
Did you have any damage?
Oh, you want to see it?
Yes, I would like to see it.
Let's go.
Gower says the mood among those he visits has been mostly good, positive, appreciative. But
we're almost 4 days into the no power situation, so starting to see a bit of a shift. And understandably, people are starting to get impatient and really wondering when the power is going to come back on.
Another big issue 4 days in, food. Many grocery stores have had to throw out whole aisles of dairy products and thawed frozen food. That means some neighborhoods have had limited access to eggs, milk, butter. Meanwhile, just cooking what you have can pose some challenges.
We're resourceful. We are campers, so we've got we've got a fair bit of equipment that we can use for outdoor cooking.
But at the end of the day, it is all about getting power back, no matter how you do it.
We were very fortunate to find a generator yesterday, and now the challenge is getting the gasoline and keeping that going for sure, but generators are very hard to come by in the city right now.
The pandemic, of course, was the kind of crisis that isolated people. It disconnected neighborhoods. But this crisis, this destruction, is having the opposite effect. It is reconnecting neighborhoods and bringing people together. Chris.
Good to see it. That's David Akin in Ottawa. Thanks, David. Victoria International Airport is back to normal now after suspicious items in a passenger's checked luggage led to a 6-hour shutdown last night. RCMP say security flagged the man's luggage during a scan, and they shut the airport down while experts determined if the items were actually explosive. Today, police say the items were, quote, inert military surplus explosives. The passenger was arrested and then released with an upcoming court date. Nearly 24 flights were affected by the closure. Toronto Public Health is investigating 2 suspected and 2 probable cases of monkeypox. There are already 16 confirmed cases of the rare infectious disease in Canada, all of them in Quebec. Health officials say the risk of transmission in social settings is low, But as Dan Spector explains, the number of confirmed cases is expected to rise in the coming days.
We have many cases, we are busy.
At this clinic in Montreal, doctors say they're dealing with a monkeypox panic. 3 confirmed cases have come through here, and Dr. Régent Thomas says as test results come back, more will be confirmed.
This morning we saw one man who have a blister in the face and near the eye.
Montreal is the epicenter of a growing Canadian outbreak. The number of confirmed cases in the city tripling since Friday. So far, the spread is happening mostly among men who've had close, prolonged contact. It can start with flu-like symptoms, then lead to lesions appearing on the body and lasting up to 3 weeks.
We know the virus spreads through direct contact, prolonged contact. Most of the time it's sexual contact. There were rats.
At this clinic a few blocks away, Dr. Robert Pilarski has treated several scared patients presenting symptoms.
Big centers like Toronto and Vancouver, they're going to spread pretty fast too.
There are now 2 probable and 2 suspected cases in Toronto, according to Ontario Public Health. One of the men had been in Montreal first.
It's been cooking under the radar for a little while, and that's why we're suddenly seeing so many cases.
The World Health Organization says there are at least 250 confirmed and suspected cases of monkeypox in more than 16 countries. Data is still being gathered, but scientists say in most cases it's not deadly and is not transmitted by casual skin-to-skin contact like brushing up against someone in public transit.
It's not like COVID, where lots of people get very sick and a fair number of people die.
Federal officials say vaccines have been sent to Quebec. Pilarski is hoping to start immunizing people as soon as possible.
I don't know why it's taking so long.
There are currently no mandatory isolation requirements in Canada.
We should follow Belgium. We should probably install the mandatory quarantine for 21 days.
Meanwhile, Dr. Thomas seeks government help to boost staffing on the front lines as his small team rolls up its sleeves to battle a mysterious foe. Dan Spector, Global News, Montreal.
Britain's Prime Minister answers for Partygate. Coming up, what a new report says about Boris Johnson's rule-breaking shindigs. Plus, a whale of a tale, the risky rescue off the Spanish coast. Spanish divers carry out a daring rescue operation to free a humpback whale. It had become trapped in an illegal drift net near Mallorca. The divers plunged into action and spent 45 minutes cutting the mesh off, which was so entangled the whale could not even open its mouth. The United Nations banned drift nets 30 years ago after earning the nickname Walls of Death for the creatures they catch in addition to the fish that they are set for. Turns out Teflon Boris is keeping his nickname. A new independent report about the Downing Street events attended by British Prime Minister Boris Johnson during COVID-19 lockdowns revealed boozy parties, some of which should never have happened at all. But as Europe Bureau Chief Crystal Gumansing reports, criticism never seems to stick, and Johnson remains in number 10 tonight.
I take full responsibility for everything that took place on my watch.
A critical new independent report makes clear the British Prime Minister's watch included boozy parties in or near 10 Downing Street. Boris Johnson reportedly attended 9 of 16 gatherings under scrutiny. One party in June 2020 resulted in the PM being fined because it broke his own COVID lockdown rules.
Yeah, it's left a very bitter taste that might never go.
I just don't think we're in good hands currently.
That report lays bare the rot that under this Prime Minister has spread in number 10.
While his political rivals and some from the voting public had harsh words for the Prime Minister, his own Conservative MPs who said they were waiting for the report to pass judgment appear to be giving Johnson a pass.
It is now time to turn a page.
There is still one more review into what's known as Partygate across the UK. It seeks to determine if Johnson deliberately misled Parliament over the pandemic parties, because it's already clear that those who made the rules here had little problem breaking them. Crystal Gumansing, Global News, London.
Just ahead, 1 year later, new details about the plan to bring residential schools' lost children home.
watching Global National.
This week marks 1 year since the Tecumlip-Teshwetmik First Nation revealed 215 suspected unmarked graves, mostly of children, had been found on the grounds of a former residential school. After months of grieving, the Indigenous community is moving forward now with the plan to identify the remains and bring the missing children home. Our Neetu Garcha has an inside look at the unprecedented process.
Walking into the former Kamloops Indian residential school where he helps revitalize the Tecumlip-Teshwetmik traditional language, Ted Gottfredson carries a new weight of the legacy left by the very institution that made his job necessary.
It was a quick decision, even though it wasn't a light one, to have the kids return back to their communities.
More than 200 unmarked burials found here are set to be exhumed for identification and potentially reunited with the communities they were taken from.
It's sacred ground, and it's of the utmost importance to leave them where they are. But as we can all admit and know, this isn't your typical situation.
Monday's memorial marked 1 year since the remains were detected at a nearby old apple orchard on the site of the former school grounds.
Ultimately, we have a fundamental human right to bury our loved ones at home.
Some are firmly against that plan, and Gottfredson, whose mother was sent to the institution, serves on a committee to determine the best way forward.
We all understand what it means to move the kids, to disturb them. There's no one who doesn't understand that.
The process includes oral tellings from elders who survived, guiding more ground-penetrating radar work, and sharing memories of loved ones who went missing.
These are steps we have to take before we even get the forensic archaeologists in there to begin their work, because once they start, we're heading for a world of hurt for our people.
In terms of a timeline, where are things at now, and how long could it take?
Years. It's going to take years.
And a lot of money, which he says the federal government should provide. The Prime Minister only making a broad promise during his visit here this week.
Whatever communities decide is the right path for them, the federal government will be there to support.
So many extremely sensitive and difficult decisions are being made here, and it's an uncharted path. So Gottfredson says they're taking their time while prioritizing science and cultural protocols. Chris?
Neetu Garcha in Kamloops, BC tonight. Thank you, Neetu. And a reminder, there is support available for survivors of residential schools and their families. The number is toll-free. It operates 24 hours a day. It's 1-800-721-0066. Up next, firing back 10 years after America's deadliest school shooting. Hope this is the turning point.
I just worry that we are becoming numb to this, that we are accepting this as the new normal. This is the only place in the world that this happens. There's not a single country in the world in which kids fear for their lives when they walk into school in the morning.
That's U.S. Senator Chris Murphy echoing what many people, Americans and otherwise, feel in the wake of the senseless massacre in Texas. Now, many people point an accusing finger at the gun lobby after tragedies like this continue to happen. This weekend, the National Rifle Association gathers in Texas. But the organization has a long history of deflecting criticism of gun violence away from gun ownership and accessibility. Eric Sorensen looks at the uphill battle to change gun laws in America.
Uvalde, Texas is like all mass shootings from Virginia Tech to Parkland, Florida. They are tragic and senseless, but it is most like Sandy Hook in Newtown, Connecticut. Young children slaughtered at school without a clue what was happening or why. But there is a disheartening difference. After Sandy Hook, there was a glimmer of hope for change to gun laws in the U.S.
I really believe this will be the start of something.
In 1994, a temporary ban on assault weapons brought fewer mass killings in the United States. The ban expired, but a spate of shootings culminating in Sandy Hook brought new resolve that something would be done about guns.
I'll protect our Second Amendment rights.
Conservative Democrat Joe Manchin said even he was ready to act.
I ask all my friends in the NRA, we need to sit down and move this dialogue to a sensible, reasonable approach.
But the National Rifle Association had its own solutions to put armed police in every school.
The only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun.
And since then, guns and mass shootings have proliferated. And today, Senator Manchin calls for background checks, but not restricting gun ownership.
And we have to reach across the bench, but we can't politicize it. It has to be done in such a practical way. It just makes sense.
Nowadays, Republican senators have a tried and true response to guns.
The most effective tool for keeping kids safe is armed law enforcement on the campus. We know what is effective, and it is targeting the felons and fugitives and the bad guys.
But never targeting the guns. Now in the U.S., there are more guns than people. And for those who want change, there is only boiling frustration.
Nowhere else do little kids go to school thinking that they might be shot that day. Nowhere else does that happen except here in the United States of America, and it is a choice.
A choice, like the choice today by Texas lawmakers to focus on mental health, not the gunman's assault weapons. So when Texas Democrat Beto O'Rourke stepped forward to call them out,
you're doing nothing.
He was shouted down.
I can't believe you're a sick son of a that would come to a deal like this to make a political issue.
When are we going to do something? Basketball coach Steve Kerr, like many Americans, knows that life and basketball will just go on.
I'm sorry. I'm tired of the moments of silence. Enough.
Right now in the U.S., there is anger and pressure to do more. But history suggests the pressure usually passes and the anger will fade. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
And that's Global National for this Wednesday. I'm Chris Galis. We'll leave you tonight with images that say more than words ever could about the grief in Uvalde. 21 lives taken, 19 of them young children, in yet another brutal mass shooting in the U.S. Now all too familiar for that country, with no resolution in sight. Thanks for watching.